Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the MBOM podcast. I'm so grateful that you've decided to join me today for this episode. This episode of the podcast is brought to you in part by Offering Tree. When you're a yoga teacher and you're trying to build your digital presence, it can be daunting. First, you might need a website. There are a lot of great tools for building websites like WordPress, Wix, and Squarespace. Then you need a way to email your students. Again, there are tools for that, like MailChimp and Constant Contact, but that's another account to pay for and a password to remember. Then you need a way to schedule and register your students. Again, there are tools for that, but it's another account to create and pay for and another password to remember. Oh wait, how do I integrate my scheduling tool with my website? If you're going crazy, I totally get that. So instead of putting all of this stuff off for another day because it's too daunting, let me tell you about a better way. Offering Tree set out to make creating your digital presence fun, easy, and affordable. With one account, you can create a website in minutes that has your schedule built right in. They also have email marketing tools to collect email addresses, send newsletters, and automated emails to your subscribers. It all works seamlessly together with one account and one subscription. To learn more about what Offering Tree can do for your digital presence, visit offeringtree.com/MBOM. Offering Tree has been supporting MBOM for over a year now, and I not only love the product and service that they've created, but I also love the people. I'm a big fan of supporting small businesses because I'm a small business myself. Small businesses supporting other small businesses is probably one of my favorite things ever, and it's really cool when I get to hop on a partner meeting and I get to talk with the co-founders of this product. As well, Offering Tree is providing special pricing for MBOM listeners. So be sure to head over and visit offeringtree.com/MBOM to receive your discount. Once again, offeringtree.com/MBOM. This week on the podcast, I am super excited to be joined by Nikki Naab-Levy. And Nikki and I are diving into the world of launching online products and services. This is such a fun and information-packed episode. We talk a little bit about Nikki's background, how she began working with yoga teachers and in the yoga industry. We talk about some of her favorite projects to work on, and then we really dive into what we need to know about launching online courses. Everything from the tech, the software, finding your niche, building an email list, the different steps involved to actually getting your course out there, creating it, marketing it, all that good stuff. So if you have been on the fence about creating an online product or service, this episode will hopefully be super, super impactful for you and give you lots of tips and tricks for creating your online course or product. Nikki, welcome to the podcast today. I'm super excited to have you here with me.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, I think we're going to cover some good stuff today that's going to be super valuable for listeners. But before we get there, can you tell me a bit about yourself and a bit about your background in terms of how you came to be working with yoga teachers and working in the yoga industry?
Yes, absolutely. So this is one of those, like, how do you say it succinctly and concisely? So without going into my movement background, which is it's varied. I've spent time studying somatic work and massage therapy and Pilates and fitness and just all the things. What all of that transpired into is that I hit this point where I'd been, like, quote unquote successful locally, and I had a small storefront. And then I got interested in digital marketing and the online marketing side because I met the person who's now my husband. We had to move. I was like, oh, I'm going to lose a large percentage of my business, and I don't ever want to have to recreate and build up a following like this again in person, even though I'd done all of the workshop models of, like, taught workshops, classes, owned a studio, done all the things. So I was like, how can I create a business that isn't so reliant on me physically being somewhere? And in that process, even though I'm not a yoga teacher, part of being online requires that people know who you are. So I started a podcast because I figured that would be a really good way to cold call people who didn't know me without just being like, hi, be my friend. And instead it could be more of like, hey, I have a podcast. Your information is really valuable. Can I interview you? And that's sort of how I started to build my network. And the funny thing, because this is how life goes, is right around that time, Trina Altman, who's a pretty well-known yoga teacher, had friended me on Facebook. And, she posts a lot of kind of interesting things. And I thought, oh, she might be a really good podcast guest. So she ended up being one of the first people who I interviewed for the podcast. And then we became friends. And then we started working together, and I started helping her with a lot of the digital things because I'm an obsessive. I love learning things, and I became obsessed with learning how to do digital marketing. And she sort of pulled me into the yoga world. And now she jokes that she's like, yeah, I know you got a crash course in yoga education. So that's sort of how all that started. So it's been interesting. And now we've done a lot of projects together. So that's kind of how I ended up in yoga land without being a yoga teacher.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. And so outside of your work kind of online or working with yoga teachers, you said you have a movement background. Are you like a fitness instructor, or what's the background there?
Oh, that this is the curse of the generalist. So in my other life, when I'm not helping yoga teachers and Pilates teachers with marketing, I'm technically, I guess, an educator. I've presented at some pretty large conferences. And then I guess you could bill most of what I do as quote unquote Pilates, but it's not really Pilates anymore. A lot of it is teaching strength and conditioning stuff to mind body people, because that stuff's scary when you learn it from a fitness person sometimes, because in fitness we seem to always be yelling, which I don't understand. And then the other half of my work seems to be teaching somatic and downregulation and nervous system regulation things to fitness people, because they don't usually want to learn it from people who know those things, because they talk to them in this way that's like very woo-woo, and I don't tend to talk that way. And so I think they tend to find kind of my more straightforward science approach a little more linear. So a lot of my teaching work in my movement background is actually spent sort of trying to straddle the two lines between like the weird somatic world and fitness world, because I think both sides are so valuable, but I think that kind of it gets lost in translation when we're trying to bring that information over where it's not being taught as often.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's super interesting to hear. And I love that you've got your hands in so many different pots and know so much different stuff about different movement type things. And also really cool to hear like how you got to the point of what you're doing now. One of the things I'm curious about is, what are some of your favorite projects to work on, or some of your favorite projects that you've worked on with yoga teachers?
I think my favorite is really like coming up with launch strategies. Because my other background, everyone's like, how many lives have you lived? I'm an overachiever, but one of my undergrads is in journalism. So I love words and I love creative writing. And to me, marketing is just figuring out, it's like creative writing. It's just figuring out, how am I going to take this thing that everyone is sort of teaching and communicate it to a specific group of people so that they understand how I can help them. And so digital launch strategy is really fun. Whatever this thing is that you're trying to sell, this online class, this program, this product, this workshop, and you sort of get to like figure out like, all right, how do I write these sales emails? How do I position this so it feels and looks a little bit different than what someone else is doing? And to me, the strategy side is just so interesting, because it's like so much creative writing and psychology and communication. So those are sort of my favorite projects. And I've helped a few different teachers with their launches for various things. In some cases, products that I don't even sell. Like one of my clients, her name's Kaylee, and she's the fit reformer online, but she sells maintenance for Pilates equipment. Like she teaches people how to clean and take care of their equipment and how to maintain it. And like I don't know a Allen wrench thingy from a bolt thingy, but because I'm such a dum-dum at that, I've actually been really helpful in helping her figure out how to communicate to people like me who own equipment, how to take care of it, because she's just so smart. She's an engineer that she says things and I'm like, sweetie, I don't know what that means. She's like, you clean it. And I'm like, oh. So it's actually, those projects are really fun for me, because then I get to help people who have really great ideas and content and actually get it in front of the right people. So that's kind of what I enjoy the most, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's really cool. And I think that it is. I mean, it's always fun to work on something where you're like not the expert in it, because then you get to kind of present that side of things where you're asking those questions that like a lot of people are going to be asking them, and that can be really helpful for somebody as they're like preparing to put their stuff online. So that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other reason why I love helping people with their website copy or with their branding or their launch strategy is because my brand is kind of out there and so forward facing. I actually just detest being at the front of the room and being front and center. So when I get to help people with their marketing, I get to hide and just help someone else be at the front of the room. And so for me, that's really enjoyable because then like, I'm like, great, no one's going to know I had anything to do with this. It's the best.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And so when it comes to launch strategies, you know, because I think that, there's a lot of people that I hear from who are like, okay, I want to work more digitally. I want to have a remote business. I want to be location independent. Obviously, for so many people, that's the dream. And in order to do that, you've got to have a product or a service to offer. And in order for people to know about it, you've got to put it out there. What are some of your top tips for launching a product or service or a course?
Yeah, this is going to sound funny, but it's I think the number one thing that people kind of go wrong, and I get it because I do it too, is they start at the end instead of at the beginning, and they start by thinking about the product they're going to sell. And I don't think that's where you should start. I think that actually you need to start with, instead of going, this is the thing I'm going to sell, or this is the technology I'm going to use, you need to start with who is the audience or the people that I'm trying to serve, and how do I get in front of them, and how do I develop relationships with them? Because when you go online, it's not just, you're not communicating to screens, communicating through a screen, you're still reaching and helping different people. So I think that my number one thing is to start asking yourself, like, actually, who is my ideal client online, and how do I work with that person? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that it's like really hard to put something out there for somebody if you don't know who you're talking to.
Right. So, I mean, if we back that train up for people in terms of strategy for an action step, like the first thing that you have to do before let's just say big picture, you're like, I'm going to sell a thing online. You can probably sell it sooner than you think you can, but it's still going to take longer than you want it to. And so I think it starts with first, like, who do I want to work with? And I'll use the first product I sold online as an example. So when I decided I was going to come online originally, and I've sort of shifted because that was a couple of years ago, I was like, all right, great. I know a lot about post rehab. I know a lot about addressing, stiffness and joint discomfort, pain, if you will. And my audience is the general public. And I kind of started thinking like, okay, so I could do something around that. I know a lot of biomechanical gobbledygook, so I guess I'm going to teach that. At the time I was a lot more reverent to biomechanics than I am right now. So now it's just biomechanics nonsense in my head. But I knew that much. And then I was like, all right, how do I get in front of those people? And so if I thought about it from the perspective of who I was working with in real life, I had a really strong client base in real life of people who were in fitness, who want to do hardcore things because of that was sort of my background, who had a lot of pain. And so when I went online, I started posting content around that. And the way that I kind of slowly started getting people to follow me, as I kind of mentioned, was I started a podcast. I started interacting with different accounts. I started going into different Facebook groups. And the real thing I started doing was running, and it was basically building an email list by running Facebook ads. And I started targeting different messaging around that in the Facebook ads. So what ended up happening after all this was I ended up selling, my first product was a hip stiffness program, but I didn't just pick hip stiffness. I actually ran 3 ads it was a PDF guide, like exercises for, and I think the 3 ads I tested were hip stiffness, shoulder pain, and like something about glutes. And the hip stiffness one blew it out of the water. So that's why I decided it was going to be a hip stiffness program. And so I kind of started positioning myself around that because I figured out really quickly, based on why people interacted with my content and jumped on my list, that a lot of people were interested in hip stiffness. And that's actually how I managed to launch my first product without having a very big audience. I think I had like 1,500 people on my list and maybe probably not even that many, and like maybe 1,500 or 2,000 Instagram followers. But it was I sort of thought about my audience first, targeted people, in this case, pages of people who were like really into fitness, like things like Beachbody, because I was like, well, if they're pounding the crap out of their joints, then they're probably have some pain. And then because I had a complimentary product, and then emailing those people, running client surveys and testing ads, targeting them to see what they kind of engaged with. So that's sort of like, and that alone took like 8 months. But that's sort of where you got to start, is like, who are you working with? What is their problem? And how are you a solution?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love how much like market research was in that while building your list at the same time. It's very strategic to get that done. And then, so once, say you've got this, you understand like what your people need, I guess, one, who your people are, two, what your people need. What's sort of the next step in terms of creating that online thing for them?
So the next thing is in creating that online thing is, as I sort of mentioned, I kind of blew past it, but I kind of want to like lay it out step by step. Like once you start getting people on your list, you need to then, and if you're like, how do I get people on my list? You got two choices. One of them, well, you got a lot of choices, but let's just say you create something small that they'd probably find helpful and want for free. That's often called an inner land, a lead magnet. It could be a mini free class. It could be a PDF of exercises. It could be a checklist. It could be a guided meditation. You can kind of use these as like all mini tests. And so in your social media posts, for example, like for the hip stiffness guide, I might show a video of I'm just gonna be very generic here, a figure 4 stretch. And then I might be like, here's a figure 4 stretch that's great if your hips feel stiff. And then I go, want more exercises like this? I created a free PDF for you that has lots of exercises to help with hip stiffness. Click the link in my bio. Call to action, tells people to do something to get it emailed to you. So that gets the people on your list. The ad essentially does the same thing. And then you want to start emailing those people helpful content at least once a month. But once they're on your list, you want to kind of start surveying them. And then once they start to tell you, you'll see themes about what they want help with. The next thing you can do is then create a version of that course or that class that you think they might want. And then you test it. So you send out a mini version of it to people and ask for feedback. And then you start seeing what they liked, how they responded, if they wanted it. Because if you do a mini version, you're going to see where everything goes wrong very quickly. You're going to be like, oh no, that's not what people want. Or in my case, like I'm about to launch a membership site. And the thing I was going to start with dumbbell workouts and no one could figure out a dumbbell. So I switched to bands. True story. So
and was that like that? And then that was more like straightforward for them?
Yes. So it was one of those things where it was sort of funny because I'd forgotten this, but the reason why I was going to do a membership site and these 30-minute workouts in the first place was because I'd done I'd basically created a strength and conditioning program. And then with that, people wanted at-home workouts. And so in my brain, I just sort of, the first tester workout I immediately went to, I just used a dumbbell. And I sort of had forgotten that there'd been all these issues where people were really confused. And part of what they wanted with at-home workouts was bands. So, I mean, part of it was I had to relearn the same lesson twice. But essentially, when I did a 30-minute workout, everyone was like, yes, love the 30-minute workout, love that I can do it at home, but so confused by the dumbbell, so stressed out by the dumbbell. And when I shifted over to band-based content, everyone was like, oh, this is great. I'm comfortable with bands. I love bands. I can easily carry them anywhere I go. I can travel with them. And so that was sort of like the testing. So essentially, you always sort of want to test your idea, and it always helps to sort of do like mini experiments. So rather than, building out an entire workout series or an entire yoga series around an idea, maybe doing just, a little miniature version of the content that you can email people and ask them for direct feedback on. And then also looking at what people respond to on your social media. So I know when I post clips of my videos on social media, the ones that do the best are tiny dumbbells and bands. So you better believe like that's what's going on my membership site is the stuff that people already want and like. So it's really about paying attention to the sort of what your people ask for, and then starting to notice the way that they describe why they want those things. That's kind of the next step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so then once you've kind of figured that out, I think one of the biggest questions that probably both you and I have both received is, what is the technology that you use? How do you pick a software? How do you start actually recording things, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so it's funny because that's the thing that everyone gets fixated on. And in my opinion, that's like the least important thing. But as far as the technology goes, and I'm just going to say right now, like I'm not because I have some great love of Apple, but because for all of my quote unquote tech savvy, I actually can barely operate anything that's tech. So I will never change what I do. Everything I do is I film almost all of my videos through an iPhone, except when I pay someone for filming, and I do all of my editing on a MacBook Pro. So for me, I actually film everything through, and I've got a link to a blog post for this. I have a microphone set up that works pretty well after having gone through like 8 microphones in 5 years. Big softbox lights. I use something called the Movie Pro app, and I use my iPhone, which is hooked up to my microphone. And then I essentially edit those videos on a piece of software called ScreenFlow, but you could edit it however you want or hire a video editor. And then personally, where you host it, you're going to have to pay for hosting. So Amazon Web Services or Vimeo are my 2 favorite. You can do it on YouTube, but I think YouTube feels a little weird and cheap. And that's just my personal opinion. And then as far as where to host it on a platform, there's a million. There's Teachable. You can build it out on a WordPress site with a membership plugin, which is what I'm doing. You can use Kajabi. There's so many out there. So you just sort of research and you pick one, but that's actually, I think, the least important part. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of the parts that people get like the most hung up on, and maybe is like the biggest roadblock. Yeah, I totally agree as well. I think that there's so much more, lots of stuff of which we've talked about, and I'm sure other stuff that's also really important that we haven't talked about yet. But I do feel it is that like, as soon as like anytime I'm like something about online courses, online products, online services, people are like, but how do I do it? Like, how do I actually create it? There's like this understanding that just seems to be, I don't know, it just feels so complicated.
It does. And I don't want to be an ass, but I'm kind of like, well, you buy a microphone and you shove it in your phone, and then you stick your phone on a tripod, and then you smile like a crazy person in your basement if you're me, and then you hit play or record, and then you hit stop, and then you make sure that there's audio, and like that's how you do it. Like you know what I mean? And then you go crazy watching yourself. But it's still the least complicated bit of all of it to me, because my question is like, but then how do you get people to buy the thing once you've made it,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, where we should head next. And that was 100% when I made my first yoga course. I had no idea what the heck I was doing. And I was like, okay, I'll just go over the tech barriers. I created the content, and I don't know, did all the things, plugged the iPhone in, got the microphone, blah, blah, blah. The tech was like a bit of a thing because I only had like oh my gosh, I want to say it was like a 4 gig iPhone at that point.
Me too.
There was like no space on that. So then I had to learn how to like get it straight to my computer because that had more space, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, did that, got the whole course, hit like publish on it. And then I just was sitting there being like, oh, but like, who's going to buy this?
Right. Exactly. So I don't know. I guess let's take it from there.
Let's dive into like, how do we actually get people to buy our courses after this like massive struggle of actually putting it together?
Right. So hopefully while you're doing that thing where you're suffering the technology, the technology learning curve of filming something, you're also building your list, and you're talking to your list, and you're sending them preferably a newsletter at least once a month so they know who you are. So you're not just like, buy my thing, and they're like, where'd you come from? Once you decide to sell something, then you have to get into the actual launch strategy. And so typically what I suggest sort of easing in with is it doesn't have to be called a challenge, because some people, especially in yoga, and I get this, they're like, I don't want to challenge people. But you have to start with some sort of thing to warm them up, right? So it could be a free challenge, but you're going to lead in with a free offer that directly correlates to the thing that you're selling. And you have to, I can't impress this upon people enough, that you have to make it as linear as possible, because you can't assume that the person who you're trying to reach understands all of the information in your head. So for example, we'll go back to my hip stiffness example, because I know that one so well, because that was the first thing I ever sold. I had a free challenge for hip stiffness. I basically emailed my list, posted all over social media, got some of my friends to post on social media for me, ran an ad that said, hey, got hip stiffness. I've created a free 5-day challenge for you. And then every day, because you want to do small, low-hanging fruit. Like, don't make this hard on people. Give them a quick win. Every day I emailed them one new exercise. So at the end of 5 days, they had 5 exercises that they could do in a row as a sequence to help with hip stiffness. And then from there, it led into the launch sequence, which was like, hey, want more? I created an 8-week course for you. You can buy it here, and then led into like the sales email. So that's kind of like the general strategy. But the key with that is, even though it sounds really boring, it was hip stiffness. It was a hip stiffness PDF to get them on the list. And then it was a hip stiffness free challenge. So I certainly emailed them about other things in the meantime. And then it was a hip stiffness course. So if you're someone who, like, let's say you're going to create a course for anxiety, like yoga for anxiety, you don't want to do a 5-day meditation challenge, even if meditation helps with anxiety, because you can't assume that your person with anxiety understands that the meditation is for their anxiety. You would need to basically have a free 5-day, 3-day yoga with anxiety challenge. And then it would just happen to have meditation in it. You wouldn't talk about the meditation when you invited people to sign up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to just give them like kind of parts of it.
Right. And it's also the way that you describe it. So if someone is coming to you, right, like if my person's coming to me for hip stiffness, I might look at them with my biomechanical brain and be like, oh, you have hip stiffness or a feeling of tight hip flexors because you actually need more inner thigh strength and greater lumbopelvic stability. I'm not going to give them a free challenge where, when I promote the free challenge, I go, hey, need more lumbopelvic stability? I create a free challenge for you, because that person has no idea what those words mean. They're like, no, I got stiff hips. Like, I don't know what that lumbopelvic thing you said is, but like, my hip hurts. Give me something for my hip. And I think that's like the most common mistake we make when we're trying to communicate with people who don't know the things we know. We use our words instead of their words. I think the words hip flexor tightness, they're not my favorite words. They're very dumb words in some ways, but I will use those words in my social media, because even though I'm going to teach someone lumbopelvic stability, the only way that they're ever going to show up for me to teach it to them is if I tell them, I can help you with your tight hip flexors, even if I think tight hip flexors are dumb words. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you kind of have to speak the language of the people that you're talking to.
Yes, exactly. And I think that that's the biggest reason why, even once we get an audience, we have a hard time, like, especially like, let's say you're a yoga teacher, unless you're a lot of the time, Pilates teachers do this too. We sort of end up selling to each other or attracting each other because we all speak the same esoteric language. And if you're trying to sell to the general public doesn't know any of the words we're using. So you have to kind of put yourself in the mind of the general public and go, how are they describing their problem? Like, maybe I cringe every time I hear the words tight hip flexors. But if my people are coming to me for tight hip flexors, and I actually do help them with tight hip flexors, even if it's not the way that they think I'm going to help them, I'm not lying to them if I say I can help you with your tight hip flexors, and it's just more important online because it's a one-sided conversation.
Hey yogis, we're just taking a quick little break from the podcast to talk about Punchpass. Are you looking for inspiration as we begin the new year? Today I want to tell you why studios around the world love Punchpass studio management software. Charlotte has found that selling her passes online through Punchpass has helped her cash flow endlessly. And online pre-registration has meant that she always knows how many clients will show up for class. Dan says simply that Punchpass is just so easy for people, and it makes him and his business look incredibly professional. Marquita says that the team at Punchpass was attentive to her, which she really appreciated. She says that if she had a question, it was going to get answered. Laura introduced Punchpass's memberships so she can automatically collect payment from her clients. She has been amazed at how much energy, excitement, and growth her business has experienced as a result. Amanda was totally overwhelmed with the other software that she was using. She needed something more simple, and she could see that Punchpass seemed to get it. She found it quick and easy to move from one software into another, into Punchpass, and she loves how Punchpass provides her with usable information at her fingertips. Head on over to punchpass.com/MBOM to read more stories about people who have transformed their businesses with Punchpass. And you are invited to try Punchpass for free for 2 weeks and see for yourself how it might work for you. Once again, it's punchpass.com/MBOM. Okay, back to the episode. And so you would run the challenge like before you kind of officially launched your course, and then the challenge would go in towards your course actually being live. And then the idea is that they get enough out of the challenge to want more from the course.
Right. So in the challenge, exactly, they get to know, like, and trust you. And again, you don't have to call it a challenge. You can call it an experience. You can call it anything you want, right? A deep dive, a jump start. The words almost don't matter as long as they appeal to you and your people. But from there, so you've gone now free challenge. Now you've got people on a list, and now you're going to go into the actual launch strategy. And the actual launch strategy is going to be, typically you need at least 7 touch points, or those are just emails, is sort of what marketing speak says, but you probably need a few more. And then kind of like maybe twice a week for 3 weeks-ish, you send them an email, and the first email you send them is essentially just an invitation to buy your thing. And it's just that. It's not like, crazy car salesman. It's just like, hey, do you have this issue? I got that. I understand that this issue is not fun. I would love to help you with it. I've created something for you, and I'd be so excited for you to join me. Here's the information. So that's basically, which is why my Instagram handle when I'm selling it, my marketing Instagram handle is PS buy my shit. Essentially, the first email is just, hi, I have a thing. It's kind of cool, buy my thing. And then every email that you send after that, because all you sent was 9 emails that said, I have a thing, buy my thing, that people, they'd hate you. They would hate you so much. That's so obnoxious. So then what you send them afterwards are a series of emails that are entertaining, helpful, and educational, inspirational, right? Like, so maybe again, if we go back to the hip stiffness example, I might send them an email that says why you have tight hip flexors. And then I'm not going to give them exercises for tight hip flexors. I'm going to now, this is my shining moment that I get to explain to you why your hip flexors feel tight, even though you stretch and you're super flexible. And then at the bottom of that, I'm like, hey, do you want some exercises to help you with this thing now that you've identified this is you? P.S. buy my shit. I have a thing. You can buy the thing here. It'll help you with this thing. And you sort of send a series of emails like that until you close the cart. And that's kind of the general strategy. Just you take that idea and apply it to whatever it is that you're going to be selling.
Right. So even while you're selling, you want to make sure that there's value in there.
Yes. Basically, you want the emails that you send, aside from the initial email that's an invitation for them to join you and buy your thing. You want to be helpful, because otherwise you're landing in people's inboxes and maybe they're not ready to buy, but they will be in the future. Or maybe, they don't have the money to buy right now, but they're still going to appreciate, even if basically people aren't usually resentful if you're trying to sell something, if you are coming at it from a good place and you give them something useful before you get to the ask. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You want to make sure there's that balance between like, like buy my thing, and here's something, PS buy my thing.
Yeah, it just has a very different feeling if it's oh, by the way, as opposed to like you come out like screaming in all letters with like whatever they did in the 90s with like those day glow things where like it blinked and there was a button.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what that was. I was thinking of immediately like those late night infomercials,
right?
Where they just like have the CTA, like the call to action so many times. Like they just keep saying the product name and they're like, and if you buy this, we'll give you something else too. And let us add this on too. Buy now. We only have 100 left. Call now. You're like,
Right.
oh God.
Right, exactly. And I think that's how people feel, where they go, wait, I have to send more than one email. And so I think that's a big piece. And then I think the other thing that's really important about that you sort of triggered my brain on is, well, there's a few things. One of the reasons why they do the infomercial thing, we don't need to do the infomercial thing, but you do sort of need to give people a reason to take action. And so a lot of the time, this is where opening and closing the cart, so only offering it for periods of time, can be beneficial, because then people get a little bit of the FOMO and they're more likely to buy it, because it's like, okay, last call, cart's closing, can't get it for 6 more months. They're more likely to click to buy because we procrastinate. Or offering, even if, like, let's say it's a membership site and it's evergreen, offering something to sweeten the deal, whether it's, there's so many things that you could offer, but it could be a set of classes that you won't be able to get otherwise. This is actually where another just sort of strategy thing, Trina Altman and I have worked together a lot on this. We'll create things together. So like I created this whole strength and conditioning program. She didn't create it, but we knew that her audience would find it really helpful, because the teachers who she serves, who are on our list, really wanted to learn strength training. And so what we did was, and also they knew her and they didn't know me as well. So we filmed some extra classes, essentially, of her teaching different like wrist preps and upper body preps with props that they were interested in. And so something that everyone got if they bought it the last time that we launched that program was, you got these 3 extra classes with Trina. So that's a way of sort of collaborating with someone else and using a bonus to be able to sort of increase your reach and increase your pool of buyers that maybe you couldn't get in front of otherwise.
Right. Yeah, that's a great idea. And if you want to keep it kind of just your business, you can still offer bonuses, but just offer them maybe in a different capacity.
Right. So maybe you film 3x, right? Maybe you're selling the strength and conditioning program, but you sell also with that three restorative foam rolling classes. So when you're really sore on your days off, you can do that too. Right. It's just You create all the content instead of you collaborate with someone else to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely makes sense. And so do you have a recommendation between like keeping, I guess, the course open all the time, or, the service always available, versus like closing it? Because I know there is this like idea of it gives people sort of some incentive to like, oh, you can only get access to this for the next 2 weeks. It gives them some like urgency to buy. What are sort of your thoughts?
I think it depends on your business model, truly. So I've done the cart open, cart close in my own business for a couple years now, but I'm about to launch a membership site. And that, with the membership site, the cart will be open all the time. But the way that I'm going to give people an incentive to buy is there'll be a teacher section. I'll do a monthly webinar. And so you have to join the membership site. It's just monthly to get the webinar. And so that way I can constantly be sort of promoting it, but in a different way every single time. And then that's to my teachers. And the way I'll promote it to the general public is I'll do like a quarterly challenge where I'll be like, all right, we're all going to do this workout challenge together for this next month. So if you jump on then you get to sort of be in the community and everyone does the challenge together. So that's a way of it's called evergreen. That's a way of keeping the cart open all the time, but constantly regenerating interest. So you just have to be strategic about it. If it's a one-off program, opening and closing cart or offering a bonus that goes away is really helpful. If it's a membership site, you just have to think about a way to like be talking about it that's not really pushy, or that gets different pools of people interested in sort of what you have to sell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've heard like lots of different stuff around, I guess different strategies. And I've always been kind of uncertain as to what the best one is. Because I always think about myself as a buyer, and like, I think there's been a couple courses that I've heard about that I've been interested in, that I've gone to like purchase, and then, they're closed. So I get on their waiting list. And then I actually have had one that's opened twice since I got on their waiting list. And both times it opened, it like wasn't a good time for me financially. And I'm kind of like, oh man, like I was ready to buy the first time I clicked, but I don't know if that's like the majority of people, it's like a lot of people are kind of need that incentive, because a lot of people would have clicked, kind of looked, got on the list. And then once it actually got opened up, that's when they're like hitting purchase.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also like what feels right to you as a business owner, and then what seems to, when you sort of talk to the people who are your quote unquote buyers, right? Your students, like what seems to work for them. And you sort of want to straddle the line between something that they respond to that serves them, but also something that doesn't make you crazy. Because part of why I open and close cart on some of my other products is, with technology, something will always go wrong. And in a launch, there will be certain questions that even if I think I've addressed them, after someone buys, it'll always come up. The number one question, the number one customer complaint email question I get when I sell that strength and conditioning program is, what's the password? And it doesn't matter that the password is on every page of the PDF. And it doesn't matter that the password is in the same welcome email 4 times. It doesn't matter that it's above the link and below the link. It doesn't matter. I will still get at least 15 emails after cart closes from people telling me that they can't find the password and they're confused. So there's just, I have to be ready and have my assistant ready to answer the what's the password question. And I would rather answer that question for 2 weeks straight and then not again for 6 months than every other day for a year. And that's just me. So part of it is also playing to your own sanity, I think.
Right. Yeah. That's so funny. It is so funny how there's these like really natural human tendencies. Like, I don't know. We all do that where you're like, I don't see the information I need. And then somebody's like, it's right there.
Yeah. And I don't say that to be flip, but but it's just one of those things where I get it. You open it, you're excited, you see a link, you click the link, and then you go, wait, there's a password? What's the password? I didn't see a password. And then you send an email. Like, it just happens. It's kind of cute in that way. But it's just, you learn very quickly that like, there's just certain things that will always happen in a launch, and you just start to be prepared for them and plan around them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Something that I'm thinking about that maybe is the step before what we've just talked about that I feel like I get asked a lot, I'm sure you do too, is, how do we decide on a price for our offerings?
Yeah, that's a great question. And everyone's going to hate my answer, which is shrug emoji. Well, because it's one of those things where I think the best advice I ever got for pricing was it needs to be, I end up being pragmatic about it, which is it needs to be high enough. It needs to be high enough to cover all of your expenses and actually pay your bills. And if you have an affiliate, actually pay your affiliates. And also high enough that when someone buys it, you don't feel resentful for the amount of time and work that you put in, but not so expensive that it's going to be outrageous for whoever your target market is. And that's where it gets tricky, because online, you look around and you could have, again, let's just go with my HIP program. You could see someone selling a similarly quote unquote packaged course that's $15, $35, $107, and $285. And the reality is that it's arbitrary. And so I just sort of personally always land, because I find that we tend to undercharge on the slightly higher end of what seems to be in the middle for an online product, whatever that online product is. And I know that that's like so vague, but you kind of just have to pick a number and see what happens, and then see how much it costs you to develop the thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe you have a different insight.
No, I don't, which is why I asked you. I think pricing is one of the hardest things. And I think that that's also like when I've worked with clients one-on-one, it's kind of, shrug emoji as well. It's like, I don't know how much this should cost, because I don't know like how much your people are willing to pay for this. Cause I think that you definitely have to know your audience and like what they're going to be willing to pay. And then I think also knowing like the value that you're offering and making sure that balances really well with also how much you're going to make. Like if you're paying affiliates like 40 or 50%, are you at the point where you're making an amount where you're like, yeah, that feels good? Or are you like, man, this is like not really worth my time? Because I think that that's a really important aspect of it too.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And also it's one of those things where, considering the value of what you're offering, for example, again, like my stuff is, especially the strength and conditioning program, I kind of double down a little bit more on making it pretty, making it like I paid someone to design it. So it's like beautiful and laid out in a really specific way. And that was very expensive. And then also knowing that I had decided to pay someone to help me develop it who gets a cut of it. And on top of it, like you're getting information from, like I've been teaching in this industry since I was 19. So you're getting a lot of information experience from me and then a strength and conditioning expert. And so I'm like, you know what, there's a lot of value in that. And so I'm perfectly comfortable charging a little bit over $100 for that, for basically what's a 12-week program, because you're paying a lot less than you would for personal training. And you're also paying for clarity, ease, good information, and something that's kind of pretty and enjoyable to look at. So I think considering like all of the things that you're putting into, whereas if, I film something from my phone, I just toss it up there, I'm not going to charge the same amount because of the level of effort that I went into developing it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense. So something I'm curious about is for anyone who's listening, who's like, yeah, all of this sounds awesome. I really want to create something, put it out online for my people, but I'm totally afraid of putting myself out there. What are your tips for those people who are kind of feeling like I'm not good enough, or I don't know how to do this, or sitting kind of in a place of imposter syndrome and just kind of struggling with the feelings of fear?
Yeah. Again, this is one of those, like, I really wish I had a better answer to this, because this is like kind of a depressing answer, but for me, that feeling's never gone away. It just has never gone away. I've just learned that I'm like, oh, that's that crazy part of your brain that doesn't make any sense. Don't listen to it. And I just kind of blast through and do it anyway, because really you can post something online and then like duck and cover and not look at it for a week if you really want to. But I think but to be a little more practical about it, I think it's about meeting yourself where it's at, which is like, if you've never put yourself out there online and you film a video, and you don't like to be on video and you've never filmed a video or presented on a video before, first off, just start with, this is like so Eeyore, but also weirdly optimistic you can do it. Just start with the assumption that whatever you produce, whether or not it's actually deeply terrible, is going to be deeply terrible. You're going to be a beginner. You're going to be really bad at it. You're going to look at it. You're going to make yourself crazy. You're going to hate it. And then when you get past all of that, because you've never done it before and because we're really critical to ourselves, just be like, cool, I'm okay with the fact that it's terrible. But if I can set aside the fact that I feel really weird about this right now, and I look at the video from the perspective of the person who I'm trying to reach and help, is this piece of information, this video, this thing I'm going to put out there, would this be helpful to someone who's not me, who I'm trying to reach? Would this been helpful to myself 5 years ago when I didn't know anything about this video I just made? I'm going to put it out there because this will help someone. And I think that when we can step outside of ourselves, give ourselves permission, just be really bad at it, whatever that means, because that's so subjective, and just post it because it's helpful. I think when we come at it from that place, it makes it easier to just share something than it does when you just look at it and you're like, why do I always have baby hair? Why does my hair always look crazy no matter how many times I brush it?
Yeah. I mean, I can 100% relate to that. Like, I do have wavy hair that doesn't really look better when I brush it, and I don't travel with a curling iron. So it is sometimes just like, this is how it's showing up today. And I could definitely sit there watching myself back and forwards, or like, as I'm editing things, being like, oh, what's with the facial expressions? And why do you do that thing with your eyes? And why does your hair look like that right now? But I mean, that's not what anyone else cares about, right? Like, the most important thing is the content that's being delivered. Like, is the message there? Is what I'm saying something valuable? Because if I put so much effort into like making sure my hair is perfect, but not in what I'm saying, somebody's going to be like, okay, well, you look cute, but like, I didn't learn anything from you.
Right. But I use that example because that's the stuff that trips me up. Like,
totally.
I swear, people must look at my videos and be like, could she have done a better job with that messy bun? What is happening? Because that's how I feel when I see my hair in every single video I film. But I'd never post anything online if that was the thing that stopped me 5 years later of being on the internet,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can fully relate to that. Like, I feel like there's definitely been days where I'm filming, so I'm like, okay, I'll put on a little mascara and maybe like, just make myself look a little bit more presentable, as if I was going to leave the house. And then I'm like, oh, okay, it's a great time to do like, some Instagram stories, maybe go live, like, because everything's like kind of a little bit more presentable, I guess you could say. But the reality is that, how often do I do that? For me, not that often. So it's kind of having to push through it and not be self-critical.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I think the other thing is any way that you can trick yourself into doing it, if you know you want to do it and you're procrastinating, can be really helpful. So this is really weird, but like I'm very pale, like blend in with the wall pale. And so before I'm going to film a bunch of videos, because once I'm filming, I'm never stressed out, but like I get really in my head about filming new content. I always go and get a spray tan right before the day I've blocked out to film videos, because I know that if I suffered the indignation of standing essentially naked in front of this Italian woman for $65 while she sprays me orange, that the next day I'm going to film the videos because I've done this thing. And it's a really weird way to lock myself into it, but it's a strange form of accountability. So if you can find a way to trick yourself into doing it, I say go for it. Whatever that weird thing is that you do to make yourself go there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that some of those tricks are like, I always think about how we really need to just like trick our brains. And because we are our brains, we need to just be like one step ahead of our brains.
Yeah, no, we really do. And I share the spray tan one because it's so weird. It's such a weird way to make yourself film a video, but it's the only way I'll do it. And I'll film tons of content for a week until it washes out. But it's just such a strange, it's the only thing I've ever found that works to get myself to film something in years.
Yeah, no, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. That's definitely like personal. So thank you for sharing that with all the thousands of people listening. And so I guess when it comes to online courses, so we've gotten past the fear, we've talked about pricing, we've talked about, putting videos together, the technology side of things, we've talked about launching them. One thing that I think maybe might wrap this up nicely is, I guess, the parts in between when you're actually working on the courses. And something that's always kind of, I guess, bothered me a little bit is this idea of like, I'm going to create a course so it can be passive income. And I feel like there's never really like passive income that comes with things, at least for most people. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts on like what you can be working on kind of in those moments between launching your course or when your course isn't as active.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because you know it, I know it. Passive income is not passive. It's just a different type of just sweat, blood, and tears. There's just nothing passive about it. I probably work harder at passive income than I ever did as like a full-time teacher, just teaching classes in private. In fact, I know I do. But it's fine because it speaks to the weird, obsessive, creative part of my brain that fulfills me. So I'm fine with that. But, I think there's a few things, and this is going to start to fall into do as I say, not as I do, because I don't always do. I'm getting better at this, but I don't always do it. I would say, when you launch that first course, launching is probably one of the most emotionally exhausting things you'll ever do. All of the people will buy at the very end. So you'll feel like everyone hates you up until the last day. So I would say set yourself like a small goal, a mid-sized goal, and a big goal, whatever those goals are for yourself. And it could just be like one person buys, 20 people buy, or it could be I just get through the process and then I learn something from it. Just treat it like an experiment. But I think after you finish that launch, stepping away from it for a little while because you're going to be so done with whatever that topic was is fine. But have in the back of your head what you're going to refine for the next time. So in the in-between phase, set a new date right afterwards for when you're going to relaunch it. And at some point, probably step back and consider what you're going to do to make it work better next time based off of what you learned or what you need to change. And then in the meantime, when you're in that in-between space, that's the time that you develop all the relationships with the people who you serve. So that's the time when you get on social media and you share a bunch of other things and you start to learn what they're interested in and you start to interact with them. That's when you can kind of zone in on your email strategy. That's actually when you would want to continue list building. That might be when you do like little social media posts. This is what I'm always doing with like different props and different exercises and different tangents. And I start seeing what else people might want to learn from me. And that gets my brain going on what a future product might be. So everything is kind of a mini experiment where you get to serve people, interact with them, and then just test your stuff before the next launch. That's kind of what I would say you want to do in the in-between phase is just sort of think about what's next and just use that time to sort of build relationships in a really organic, non-stressful way where you're not really asking people for anything except maybe their email from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Right. I love that. And yeah, I'm glad that you feel the same way about passive income as me as well.
Oh, not passive, not passive at all.
It's definitely not passive. And that's like, I don't know. I feel like I very much learned that from experience, like that moment of like, oh, I hit publish on my course. Like, sweet, I'm going to make money off of this. And then I was like, oh, wait, who like is going to buy this? And then I was like, oh, right, I need to sell to them. Well,
Yeah.
that takes time and effort, a lot of time and effort. And then after it was like, okay, how can I improve it? What can I make better about this? And then it's like, okay, how do I get more people into it? And it just is continual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that I want to be really upfront about with people here is like I'm pretty good at digital strategy now. I've helped a lot of yoga teachers and some Pilates people with their digital strategy, but I didn't just like learn this by osmosis, and I didn't even just learn it by testing things. Like I paid a lot of money for private business coaching and went to someone and was like, "Hey, help me. Like I don't know what I'm doing. Can you give me a process? Teach me a process." Like I haven't invested as much into business coaching as I have into movement education, but I mean, I've invested several grand. So I think it's like anything else. If you want to be good at it and you're completely lost in space, you might need to pay for some help to figure out how to do it and make it make sense for your business. And that'll probably get you there a lot faster than if you just guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And if there's anyone listening who feels like they're already really struggling as a yoga teacher and they're just not in a position to hire somebody to help them with this type of thing, do you have any like go-to resources that might be a good place to start?
I mean, there's so much free stuff on the internet. But I would say start trying to find some maybe free copywriting resources to start wrapping your head around like an ideal client. Start looking for maybe like, there's a lot of marketing people who teach something like they'll teach like quote unquote like list building, like how to like maybe launch your free lead magnet. So I might just grab some of the freebies from some of these people. But as far as names of people who are making some of that free stuff, I mean, Melissa Casera has been one of my primary business coaches. I love her stuff. And she has a blog. She's got a blog that's got a ton of free content on it. Including, she's got this one page that's like how to write an about page with like Mad Libs. That's really nice. Alexandra Franzen's another copywriting person, and she has a lot of free prompts for writing things, because I think that's really the biggest struggle is really the basics of launching online or getting people on your list is simple. You create a free thing, you invite people to get the free thing by joining your email, and then you sell them things in email. But I think the real challenge is figuring out how to communicate with the people who you're trying to serve. And I think that comes down to figuring out how to write in a way that gets the right people's attention. And that is actually the practice and the challenge and the struggle. And that maybe that's just because that was my struggle, even though I'm a writer. But I think the more you can learn about copywriting, the more effective you're going to be online.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the hard things about that too, because I found that as well, is like you sit down to write copy and you're like, okay, I know who I want to write to, but I don't know, when you just have a bunch of like faceless email addresses, you're like, I don't actually know who these people are. And so I think one of the best tips that somebody ever gave me when it came to building that was like, be okay with unsubscribes, because that means that person doesn't want to hear what you have to say. They're not interested in what you have to sell. And they've given you like a little bit of a gift by just removing themselves from that space so that you're not wasting your time and your energy trying to attract them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing is, if you're not sure how to communicate with your ideal client, go have a conversation with a real human being. So if there's someone who's always DMing you who seems like your ideal client, be like, hey, can we have like a 10-minute virtual coffee date where we hop on the phone and I just ask you questions about like why you follow my stuff and what you want help with? Or like send a survey to like your audience, to your list, and offer them, say you'll randomly select someone to get some sort of fun prize. That's something that's kind of exciting to them if they take 5 minutes to answer a couple questions. So I think really just spending time interacting with people and then really starting to notice the specific words that they use and the specific questions that they ask you. I think that's the most powerful way that you can reach people, is understanding their language and how they're communicating with you, as opposed to you just trying to talk to them with your elevated language that they've never heard before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really, really good reminder. I think for all of us who are trying to communicate with people, sometimes we forget that, in every industry we're in, we have lingo. I even had that at one of my AirPods were broken. And so I called Apple tech support to see if they could help me and help me replace them. And she was using like their Apple lingo. And I was like, I'm sorry, can you just like be really clear about what you're asking me to do right now? Cause like I actually don't understand what it is that you're saying. And she was just using fancy verbiage for like do this with your AirPod.
Yeah.
Essentially. And I was like, I don't understand. Like I speak fluent English. That's my first language. Like I don't understand what you're asking me to do right now. Like I'm not dumb. I understand technology. Like you're just speaking in like verbiage that is not in my vocabulary.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is marketing is just communication. It's taking something that and sharing it with people who don't know it yet, and then explaining to them in their words how you can help them. But the only way that you get that is you have to pay attention to the words that you use. So in this situation, like the AirPods, like that's brilliant. Like the person on the other line needs to learn to say AirPod, not, whatever I don't even know what you would say. That's not AirPod, but you know what I mean.
There was it was such a weird word. I wish I could remember. It sounded like it was like out of Star Wars or something. It wasn't like the device because I feel like I would have got that. It was like, I don't know. It was something really weird. It was like the something. And I was like, I'm sorry, what is that you're talking about? I was like, are we talking about my AirPods? Are we talking about like my MacBook? Like, I don't know what we're talking about right now. But
yeah, it's a thing. And I think the other thing I would give people for advice, like I wish I could point you to like specific free resources, is just like I said before, be willing to be really bad at whatever you're doing. Just assume you're going to be bad at it because you're a beginner, and that's absolutely fine. And rather than putting so much pressure on yourself that it has to be this great big thing that makes thousands of dollars the first time you launch it and all this stuff, just sort of step back and be like, cool. This is a mini experiment. I'm going to do a small version of whatever it is I have in mind. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to see what works. I'm going to do more of what works. And then I'm going to see what flops. I'm going to do less of what flops, or at least stop and ask myself, why do I think this didn't work? And just keep going with that, as opposed to like trying to have all the answers, because I don't know, the biggest thing I've learned in business now is that I never have the answer to anything. I'm just always sort of tripping and falling forward and sort of noting what seems to work better as I go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's like just an important step to recognize in it, because things are always changing, especially with technology and the way that, we communicate with people and services to do advertising, like all that stuff changes really quickly. So we kind of, master one thing and then we need to learn another thing.
Yeah. Or we change our mind. We decide that the thing we were selling and the audience we were serving, we don't want to sell or serve anymore. And then we have to go relearn the whole process all over again with some new people. So that happens too.
Yes, absolutely. That is very true. Amazing. This conversation has been so awesome. I'm curious, do you have any final tips for people who are listening before we wrap up today?
I think, like I said, I think being willing to be a beginner is so important. I think just acknowledging that it's scary and meeting yourself where you're at, wherever that is important. I think just doing something and then seeing what happens is really important. And then I think we didn't really get into it, but handling criticism. Not everyone is going to be for you the same way that you're not going to be for everyone. So if someone comes at you and you really, it hurts, right? Anytime someone comes at us or criticizes us, it hurts. Like I remember, I can tell you pretty much every mean comment that's ever been left on anything I've ever posted on the internet, even if I block it immediately. But I think if we step back and we go, well, is this something wrong with me, or is that person a jerk? Because if they're a jerk, just block them. Or if you go, you're not someone who I want to serve. Like, you're not my people. I don't actually want to be in a room with you. You sound terrible. Block them. So I think that, unless it's like the 3-star review or the person who's coming to you has a legitimate complaint, because we know what a legitimate complaint is, honor that. But if someone's just being mean, or they're just kind of crazy, or it's about them, or they're just not your people, just block them. Like, criticism is going to happen. It probably means you said something interesting enough that they paid attention. That's a good thing. But I wouldn't spend any time obsessing on the people who you're not trying to serve. I would just sort of do what you can to sort of shelter yourself from them and not deal with them at all if you can help it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that that is really, really great advice. I think especially too, because like I can completely relate to like, could also tell you, bad reviews or moments where people are like, I don't like this, it's not good enough. And those are the ones that stick in our head. And unfortunately, and so it is a reminder to like, is this valid? Is this something that I actually think is true? And if it's not, then yeah, block them, get them out
Yeah.
of your space. They don't need to
Yeah.
be there bringing you down.
Just move on. I mean, like, and sometimes it becomes laughable. Like sometimes I'll do a visual thing in a video. Like I've got this one viral YouTube video where I'll be like, here's 3 exercises, and I hold up the number 3. And one of the snarkiest comments I get, and I've gotten it multiple times, is like, gee, I couldn't count to the number 3. And I'm just like, why? Go away. Like this doesn't, yeah. So people will criticize you for like, really, that's the other thing. The things that you're going to get criticized for are never the things that you thought you'd be criticized for. It's always going to be for something really weird. That's the other thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that just gives me that like ick feeling of like,
Right.
why? What is wrong with people? But
yeah,
those people exist, and
it's always a white dude. By the way, it's always a white dude. I'm just saying. That's fine.
Oh my gosh. That's a good tip though. So if people want to learn more about you, maybe your programs, offerings, just go see what's up in the world of Nikki, where can they go to find you?
So probably the hub for all of my stuff, though I'd need to do a better job of organizing my website, is nablevy.com, which is my last name. And that's a nightmare in itself, but it's just N, and I'm sure you'll put in the show notes, but N as in Nancy, AABLEVY.com. And then if you want to connect with me on Instagram, that's really where I spend all my time, because Facebook is full of crazy people these days. As far as I can tell, I don't like being there. My primary fitness account is Naab-Levy. So you can see how I actually brand and sell fitness products and movement products and yoga product, not yoga, but like I work with yoga people sometimes. So you can sort of see how I've branded those things from sort of the consumer end. Or if you want marketing advice, you can go to the Instagram handle PS by my shit. And that's all just marketing and internet stuff and behind the scenes of how I sell the things on the other account. So those are probably the 2 best places to kind of connect. Or like I said, my website.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, I'll make sure that there's links for all of that in the show notes, of course. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today, Nikki. This has been so awesome chatting with you. And I'm so excited to share all of this wealth of information with the world.
Thanks for having me. Launch stuff is so much fun.
It is. And I think we need to put it out there as launch stuff is fun, because I think a lot of people kind of dread it. And you're absolutely right. This can be a super fun part of your business.
Yep.
All right, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. Nikki was so fun to talk to and has such a wealth of information. So make sure you go and check her out. Of course, there are links to the episode on the show notes at mbomyoga.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And of course, you can find me in the private Facebook community. The private Facebook community is called Yoga Business Badasses. You can just search it in the search bar, answer the questions, and I'll let you on in. And one of the reasons I'm really excited about the Facebook community is that for the last couple of weeks, I guess pretty much all of 2020, I've been doing weekly Facebook Lives. And these are talking about the podcast episodes. So now that you've listened to this episode, I would love to hear what you think. Ask me any questions you have, any topics you'd like to talk about. I'd love to hear your top business lessons from this episode. And I will be in the private Facebook community on Wednesday going live to talk about this episode of the podcast. And this has been such a fun thing that I've been doing all month. It's definitely got me outside of my comfort zone when it comes to being on videos and kind of talking to myself. But I really love it because it means that I get to interact with you guys and just hear what you think about the show. So head on over to Yoga Business Badasses and let me know what you think of this episode. All right, thanks so much for listening, and I will see you next week. Namaste.